cybersecurity since the morning. You must have realized by now that it's a really vast field. Every single topic can go on for hours and hours. So malware itself is also a pretty huge topic like that. So it's kind of going to be difficult to cover the whole thing. So what I thought was we can divide it into small steps and do a simple kind of simplify it a little bit and take it as to the whole process. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a really small malware. We're going to test it out, see how it works on our local machines. We're going to see how it can be used to collect and steal data from victims' computers. And in the end, I'm also going to try and upload it to a website that we create, a kind of a phishing website from which you can kind of trick users into downloading and running your malware. So yes, that's kind of the summary. If you guys have any questions at any point, yeah, feel free to either unmute and speak or type it in the chat. I will be looking at them. Okay, let's start. So what is malware? Is anybody have an idea? Come on, you guys have been listening about cybersecurity since the morning. I'm sure somebody must have some clue. Any guesses?
Basically, any virus, ransomware, worms, like anything which is gonna maliciously, basically, yeah, malicious software in a way is malware, and it has like basically virus, ransomware, stuff like that. It causes cyber attack. Any code that causes cyber attack, in a sense.
It's very malicious piece of code. Great. So what does malicious mean?
Dangerous.
Bad, dangerous, not favorable.
Okay. Well, you guys have actually covered the exact definition of malware. Any malicious piece of code is in fact called as malware. I am going to, you guys can see my screen, right?
Yes, you can see your screen now.
Okay. 1 second.
You're sharing the virtual box just to confirm, because like.
Yes. Okay. What is malware? I don't have any slides prepared, by the way. It's going to be mostly Googling because as CSE engineers, you guys probably know Google is your best friend right after Stack Overflow. So for everything in cybersecurity as malware detection, everything, it's like just like Stack Overflow for programming, Google is going to be everywhere. Like nobody is going to do anything in cybersecurity without consulting Google first. So yeah. So malware is any software intentionally designed to cause damage to a computer server or computer network. Almost exactly what you guys said. So I asked you a question, what does malicious mean? So you guys can see here, no? This word, intentional. If you ask me, I think that is the highlight here of this definition. Because actually, can you guys give me an example of what you think is malicious? Maybe some kind of program that you would call as malicious.
A program which will cause your laptop to hang, in a sense.
Okay.
Like I keep a loop which keeps running and running and running, and it causes like keeps taking my memory and CPU usage.
Okay, so let's say you wrote a regular program in your computer science lab, the Hello World program basically. You wanted to print Hello World 10 times, but you forgot the less than 10 condition. So it's an infinite loop. So does that qualify as a malware or is it just a bug?
It's a bug, not a malware. Yeah, makes sense.
Any other examples? That was a good example actually that can be used as a malware too, the infinite loop. Any other examples?
Any PC program that hurts the computer is a malicious thing.
Anything, yes, but I'd like an example. Like, let's say there's some kind of malicious website. Let's say example.com is a malicious website. Okay. So would you say that any software which accesses this website is inherently malicious? Like if I gave you an app or an exe file and I asked you to find out whether it's malicious or not, what would you do? What would you check?
What are the services approaching?
Exactly. So like if you had, let's say the program that I gave you actually made a request to this example.com. So would you say that it's malicious? I'm telling you that example.com is a malicious server. And I'm telling you this app is contacting this URL. Does that make it malicious?
Highly likely.
But I'm hitting enter my Google Chrome browser has gone to example.com. This qualifies to the definition, but would you say Chrome is a malicious software?
No,
No, right?
you can make it one.
We can, but is it? Did Google want to make it as a virus, or is
No.
Google doing everything they can to prevent it from being a virus?
Later.
So that's why I said this is a key phrase here, intentional. Any kind of software, whether it's malicious or not, the code for those apps is going to look extremely similar. They are going to be accessing the same APIs, the same network calls, the same file system. If you're running on a phone, the sensors, the camera, the microphone, every app, whether it's malicious or not, is going to be using the same thing. So how do you say whether something is a malware or not?
Signatures.
Sorry?
There has to be some signature for anything, like
Yes.
how in bio.
Yeah, but how do you know that signature? I'm asking, as a computer, if you wanted to write an algorithm, you cannot, you just realize you can't say if it goes to example.com, it's malicious. There's more to it than that. So like what I'm trying to say is malware, something is called a malware when you look at the intent the person had when he wrote the program. Like, so somebody who's accessing example.com could have just wanted to actually see whether it is working or not. Just copy out this text and say print, instead of hello world, print example domain. So that doesn't make it malicious, even though it accesses the malicious website. But that same person, if you wanted to download some kind of malicious software from here, this file, if you wanted to download, and then he's running that file, that code is doing something malicious. So you see what I mean? It's the intent, the reason why that person wrote that code. Another example could be the contacts stored on your cell phone. Both the Truecaller app is also going to be accessing all of your contacts. It is uploading the contacts and your friends' names and your phone numbers to the Truecaller servers. But is Truecaller malicious? No. If some other random app I gave you did the same thing, would you say it's a malicious? You would, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's what I'm trying to say. Everything in malware depends on what we want it to do and why we want it to do that. Okay. So yes, I think you guys are clear on what is malware. So let's create a sample malware. So the malware I was thinking of doing today is actually called a keylogger. Has anyone heard of the word keylogger before?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you give me a small summary of what it does?
It logs each key that you type. Yes.
So basically,
Like each
something
key
that
press, it takes track of that. So then after you have all the key presses, you can just take whatever information is typed on by your keyboard.
yes, basically it's a program running in the background of your computer, monitoring your keyboard. Every keystroke that you made, it's saving a log and it's uploading that information somewhere to a malicious person, that is me. So if you guys look here, malware contains a lot of types: computer viruses, worms, Trojan, ransomware, spyware. Keylogger is a type of spyware because it's spying on the users. Okay, so do you guys have any VirtualBox on your machines, by the way? This is going to be a hands-on workshop. Like if you don't have VirtualBox also, it's fine. You can use your local machines. I just want to know, are you guys having any VirtualBox?
I guess some. We have told them to install, so.
Okay, Linux or Windows?
Linux only.
Okay, so I'm assuming you guys are all having a Windows host OS as well. Like towards the end, we're going to be creating an executable exe file. For that to run it on Windows, we're going to need Windows. So like for now, I think you can use your Linux as well. It's up to you guys basically. Typically malware, they run in a VirtualBox because it's more safe and doesn't harm your host OS. But yeah. Okay, so like I said, everything is going to be on Google today. Like if I opened my laptop, gave it to you and said, build me a keylogger, what would you guys do?
Search, build a keylogger. How to build a keylogger.
Very nice. And then you'll get a very simple thing. one-line code, already exe will be there. You'll download and install. We won't understand what the keylogger does at all. So can we kind of break down the definition that you guys just gave me? A keylogger monitors your keyboard. That's what you guys said, right? Monitors your keyboard, sends the event of every keystroke to a machine. So can we see, like, we're going to be using Python today. So Python, I know you guys know there's literally a library for everything. So it doesn't seem that far-fetched that there could be a library that we can use for a keylogger as well, right? We can just search for that and find out Python library. So do you guys want to tell me what I can type in here aside from the word keylogger?
Input from keyboard or something like that.
Yeah. So can we say monitor keyboard input? Let's see what that gives us. Choice number 1. This is the exact same steps I followed while I was preparing for this workshop, by the way. I'm trying to show you guys exactly how it works in real life. Everything starts with a Google search and the first few links. If you guys listen to the previous slide on healthcare, right? I came in the middle when there was a slide explaining that acceleration of threads is continuously increasing. It's because the people who are hiding, identifying malware have to go through the process every time. But the person who's writing the malware has a job, very easy job. All he has to do is do one Google search, click on it, he'll find sample code right here. This code isn't actually a keylogger, but it's very, very close. So yeah, just changing a few parts in here, he can change the hash value, he can change whatever. So the other person, that the good guy, has to do his work all over again, but we have it very, very easy. We, in the sense of the criminal, we're not criminals, we're the good guys, but yeah. So PyInput, seems to be a Python library. It allows you to control and monitor input devices. Currently, the keyboard monitoring is supported. So let's see if they have, this is for the mouse, controlling the mouse, and they have monitoring the mouse. Let's see if they have anything for the keyboard as well. I haven't seen this page before, actually. Yes, monitoring the keyboard. So you have an on press function. Basically, it just prints out alphanumeric. A key on your keyboard was pressed, or if a special key was pressed. Yeah, we have special keys here. Escape. You guys want to just run this in code and see what happens? I will give this link to you guys. Whoever is, if you guys are following along, you can also try it out on your machines. You can just find where the chat is. Yeah. So if you scroll to the bottom, there's a section called monitoring the keyboard. That's a code I just copied. Now let's go to your terminal. Okay. I'm just creating a blank Python file. And I'm just going to paste this. Yeah, so you can see there's an OR in here. Like, it means we keep either this block of code or we keep this part. I just delete the bottom part. We'll run just the first one. See what happens. Python test.py. Okay. By the way, it worked for me because I've done this before. You guys probably would have had to do one additional step, which is installing the package.
Yeah, the code is simple. It's just like pip. As if you see the page itself, there is a, the first line itself says pip install py input.
Just copy that code and just put it inside your terminal. Mine is still loading, so it's, yeah, just pip install py input. It will download and install for you. I think it's just a few MB. Yeah. Now, I'm going to open Notepad and just type in some random stuff. Let's see if there anything was captured. Look at the, yes, nice. You can see even the special keys like there's Alt Tab to switch to zoom. This I'm guessing is Control C. which I press to Control Shift 1, which I press to open this new tab, and Notepad, which I press to type in, and all of the keys have been captured, if you guys can see. So basically they've done 50% of our work for us. So let's try and make this into a little bit of a keylogger kind of thing. So we don't just want to send these big strings to our server every time, right? We just want to capture the words, full words, not just the letters. So what I'm going to do is I'll delete these text. Let's just by the way, if you look at this code here, if you press escape, it will stop the listener. So you can do that right now. Press escape and this program will quit. Whoever was running it along with me, you can do that for now. So let's see what to do here. We need to copy all these strings and save them somewhere, right? So let's keep string equal to, keep it blank for now. Okay. And every time in here, every time a key is pressed, I'm going to do string plus equal to key dot char. And so we need to be checking how this works, right? So like, maybe we have in another print string here. Let's try running this. I'll just open a new here. It was, it's a Python thing. I declared a global thing, so I have to mention global string in here. That's running now. Let's try and see how it goes. But if you guys think I'm going too slow, I don't know how much of you guys have experience in Python. So if you think I'm going too slow, tell me and I'll speed it up.
Just show the test code, like I didn't see where the global was kept.
Yeah, first time.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, let's try typing something. So you can see previously it was just printing one at a time, and now it's basically appending everything I print to a single line. We actually don't need the release. See, if it's a keylogger, it needs to be kind of discrete, right? We can't be printing stuff to the console, informing the user that something is going on. So I will actually delete this line as well. And I'll put pass. Pass means it does nothing, just exits. Okay, we actually don't need this on release. Just on release is basically like when you're pressing and holding a button, right? For Control A. So on release is when you release the button after pressing it. We're not really interested in that. Just pressing the keys is enough for us. So I'll just do this, and we can delete this entire function on release. And maybe here we can. So previously, what is going to happen now is it's just going to keep on adding a string, adding a letter to the string every time. So at what point do you want to submit? I will say every time you press enter, upload it to your server. So how I'm going to do that is, how do we check for enter key is? Okay. Key dot space. So I'm assuming there's a key dot enter as well. Keyboard dot keyboard capital K, right? Yes. Keyboard dot capital K dot enter. At this point alone, I will print the string. Now next, instead of printing it, we're going to be submitting it to a server next. We will do that in a while. Let's just check if this is working. Yes. So now it doesn't print out every time, but just as and when you press the enter key, even if there are multiple words. So this is going to be useful to us later on when we are trying, like If you wanted to monitor for user inputs, like the username and password, you'll find that both of them come in a single message. So it's going to be very easy for us. Let's just quit this. I kind of deleted the code that quits it, if you guys notice. Like there was an on-release function. Since I close it, there's no way to stop this keylogger anymore. That is kind of intended behavior from a malware. So in order to close it, now you can just close the terminal itself. We will open it again later. But you guys realize this is your entire keylogger in just 18 lines of code. It's that easy to create a keylogger. The only thing we're going to do now is replace this print string with a call to a network. So a very simple way to do that is import requests, request.get localhost 8000 / save. Let's write this down for now. I'm not sure whether I need to explain what this is doing, but I will just in case. So this is one thing. Let us run this now. Python test.py. And you'll also need to start a server. Like we can kind of use Python's built-in servers for that for now. Just run this command, python-m http.server. What this does is it starts up a really small HTTP server locally on port, this hit allow, on port 8000. Yeah, you can see the request is already come in because I just hit enter here. Yes, python-m http.server. That's exactly what I just typed in here. So every time we press something in here, that message is going to come into our server. This is a test message. And it's been saved here. Okay, the spaces are missing. It's all a single word. So maybe what we'll do here is we'll add in another thing. Okay, key equal to keyboard.key.space plus equal to a space. And probably once we hit enter, we need to refresh the page. Otherwise, every time they send a GET request, even though the Python-m came in first, it's kind of repeating here, followed by this. So we'll just kind of reset it back to an empty string. That's it. I'll just close this down. So this 22-line program is a fully working keylogger at this point. We have essentially completed a malware. The only problem is, I'm sure some of you must be wondering why all we did was type something here, something else shifted over here. Didn't seem like something useful at all, right? So let's imagine instead of localhost, we actually put in something else. What can we put? I'll give you an example. If anybody is following along with this, you can also do this. Just replace localhost with the IP address I put in here. 15.206.125.109 : actually no need for the colon 8000. Just yes. Is anyone following along, by the way? If you have changed localhost to this IP address, be very careful because this is basically going to submit every button that you press on your keyboard to a server that I control. To basically your keylog data is going to be coming to me. So if you guys want to see it, try it out, but it's not necessary. Localhost is actually fine. Just want to show you guys. So is anyone doing it? If anyone is doing, please type yes in the chat.
I kind of did, but like I have to run it again, so I'm not doing it.
Cool. Arnesh has done it. Anyone else? There's a yes in front end. See that? Okay. Okay, so I'm going to run this code now. Python test. By the way, instead of Python, if you do Python test, this is constantly running here. Check. So 1, 2, 3. So now I'm going to try doing something a little bit different. Like instead of Python to run it, I'm going to do Python W test.py. Look, the program seems to have terminated. You notice it's gone on to the next command, but I'm going to continue typing stuff here. You guys can tell me what you want me to type, or I'll just type something random. Harry Potter. Yeah. So it looks as though the program is completely terminated, but
We can't see the screen that you're showing, actually.
you can't. You can see VS Code, right? And
Yeah, VS Code. We can't see the server that you're showing. I think so.
that was intentional. I'm about to show you. I was trying to show you guys how it looks from a victim's perspective. All it did was run this one command and then it terminated. But I still typed in Harry Potter and that showed up here. This is the server code that I wrote. It basically does the same thing as the http.server thingy, but it checks the URL, it copies the string and it saves it in. You can even see the source IP. So Arunesh, you said you were testing it, right?
I have to run it because I have to anyway like run it once again. So I was like,
okay.
Because if I start running it, I have to shut it down, right? It's my whole laptop, and I'm not on VM, so.
Okay, no issues.
I can run it. That's not an issue if you want me to. But you should
No,
just know
right.
if you know how to terminate, that will be better. That's all I can say.
This program is intentionally non-terminatable. It is a malware code.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm like, you told me to execute it once. That's why. After the exe comes, I execute it. Don't worry.
Did you copy paste the code and follow along with that part?
Yeah, that I did. The code is there with me.
Okay, there is no issues.
Can we like put additional code saying if exit is typed, then exit it to not terminate?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, previously we did have some kind of logic like that, no? We had an on release.
Escape.
Yeah, if you press escape, it closes. You can't do that. Sorry, were you saying something?
Somebody unmuted, I think so, like accidentally.
Yeah. So yeah, to answer that question, we can have it terminate after a few minutes, but it kind of defeats the purpose because it's not a real malware at that point.
Testing purposes.
Testing purposes. No thanks. I want real world. Anyway, so we are kind of done with this. Do you guys want me to show you the code that I used to generate this? I mean, this server?
Yeah, sure. Like the HTTP code.
It's more of web development and not, excuse me, just 1 second. Yeah, it's kind of not really cybersecurity at this point because the malware ended at this. All it does was take in this string and substitute this. So you can actually write any backend, any web app that just handles this URL and it will still work. If you guys want me to go through it, I can quickly spend 2 or 3 minutes showing you the code. Do you guys want me to do that?
I guess that's not needed because like half people like here people know, but like already we're on time crunch. It's like 10, already 4:50. That's it. Okay. You can send the code though. Can you send like make sure like all the code is there in some zip file so that we can access it?
Sure. I have it. Just text me after the workshop and I'll send you a copy. And you can forward it.
Drive. Guys, all the like PPTs and all mostly will be in the drive that we sent earlier. So just check out that. We'll send a mail once you're done uploading all the stuff.
Okay, so let's move on, I guess. This is a working keylogger at this point, but how does somebody run this keylogger? You need to open up the terminal, type in Python test.py. No person who doesn't understand Python is going to do all this. So if you want somebody to actually run this code, you have to make it clickable, make it an exe file. Somebody sees an exe file, their first instinct is always to click it, no matter how many warnings Microsoft Defender will show. So let's, how do you convert a Python script to an exe file? Does anyone have an idea? Does anyone know that it's possible?
It's possible because, but yeah, it's possible. That's like one simple command. I guess I've seen it somewhere.
Yes. There's actually more libraries like PyInput. There's something called Python installer. There's something called py2exe. Basically, what they try to do is just like I explained, people do not want to go to the terminal and type Python. So this is again an example of a tool which has thousands of legitimate use cases. Any Python code that you want people to be able to run it easily. So that is why they made that tool. But what are we using it for? We're using it to create a malware and distribute it to others. Again, it all comes back to the intent, why we're doing this code. So let's just install one of them. I think it's called PyInstaller. It's already installed. Great. So yeah, so the command to do this is PyInstaller -w. W for the Python W, as you guys saw before. By the way, I never explained what Python W is actually is. Do you guys have any idea? It looked like the program terminated but it actually didn't.
And in background,
I guess, yeah, background process.
Yes, it's a functionality within Python language itself called headless mode. What it does is it decouples your program from the console, from the terminal. So if you had a print statement in here, the output would never be displayed on the screen. To put it in simple words, now it will basically create a new process to run that program, but it won't create any kind of a GUI or a graphical user interface. It won't spin up this kind of a terminal screen to run it. It will happen completely in the background. The only way to actually find out that it's running is to go to Task Manager. It probably will be called Python. Let's see where it is. Yes. Now the keylogger is done. All the code that I ran, all this, no, pip install, PyInstaller, all of that was also actually captured in this console. Now it won't because I terminated. So yeah, let's move on. I guess the -w basically tells the program to run it using Python W and not the regular Python. The second command I'm going to do is called onefile. Basically tells you to create a single exe file and run it. Take a few minutes, see what all dependencies are there, take PyInput as well, and package it up into a single exe. Now, while this is running, it's going to take a few minutes. How do you guys think, like we have an exe file on this VM. How are we going to send it across? Like, let's say I have a friend who I want to prank into installing this keylogger. How do I'm not just going to send this exe and tell him click on it. He will not do that. He knows what a person I am. So how can you trick him? Any idea?
hide in some other stuff and send him with that.
Sorry?
Hide in some other stuff and send him with that.
Okay, that's a good idea. That's basically what we're going to do. It's called phishing. Has anyone heard the word phishing before? PHISHI.
Yes, like basically you create a fake website which has all the everything front end and stuff, but when you click like login, it doesn't go to the original one. Basically a fake website that you made.
Yes. Basically, if you go to google.com, it will look exactly like this, but when you click on Google search, it won't do a Google search, it will do something else. That is what we're going to do today. So small demo. Just go to google.com, right click. Oh, there's no save as. This will download the HTML for this page. I'll just put it on my desktop. And now if you go to your google.html here, yeah, open it in Edge. Basically the same thing. You can see even the Chrome pop-up, everything is up. Something is missing in this page, which doesn't make it look like the original. Does anyone see it? Sorry?
Google image.
Yes. I don't know whether that's some cybersecurity safety thing that Google has done or not. But anyway, it's very easy to bring it back. Let's just let's open the HTML file in our VS Code again. Where's VS Code? Yes. Let's see why it's missing. So I'll go back here, right click, inspect element. Inspect element is basically kind of like a shortcut. Like you can click on any element and it will go to the HTML for it. Okay, so let's just find out I'm going to just delete all this stuff in the SRC. I'll call it just Google color logo.png, and I will also delete this following SRC set because I have no idea what it is. In basic HTML, it's just an image with an SRC. Now, let's try and probably that image got saved in here when you did Control S. Yes. I'll just copy this out here. Let's reload. Hopefully it should work now. No? Oh, all this got reset. Where did it come back from?
Didn't save in the VS Code also.
Yes, my mistake.
Edit in the inspector element.
Okay, so let's try and find out where this thing is hidden here. I'll copy it here and do Control F. Why is it so slow today? Yes. Is it saved? Yes, it is. And our logo is back. Very easy, no? Now next. Now that wasn't really the main thing. What we were trying to do was make it look like the original. Now we're set up and we're ready to, fish. So what do we want to do? Let's say when someone types in how to be safe from malware, instead of doing an actual Google search, I'm going to try and make it download a file, download the exe file that we just created, and maybe have some kind of pop-up saying, please click the exe file to download this, to view your search results. Do you guys think, side question, do you guys think that will actually fool people? Like seeing Google tell you to install an exe file?
No.
No?
No, because like anyone will be like, why? Like it knows how Google generally works. Why would it suddenly work like this, right?
I'll tell you, Google has given a software update that is more efficient Google search, or like Android Google app is there. Now there's an app for Windows as well. Download and see your results.
Very non-Google move, but yeah, for a layman, it might cause like him to click it and download it. That's possible.
That layman is the reason. Have you guys heard of the Nigerian prince? He's a very famous person. I think you might have heard.
So yeah, he's some phishing guy only, like people do scams using his name, like Nigerian Prince, something like that. I've heard in TV series.
Do you guys think that, I know you guys don't know the Nigerian prince isn't a real person, but do you think there was just one person who randomly decided I'm going to be a prince from Nigeria and then emailed 1 million people?
Obviously, no.
Yes. So
like one person did it and then a bunch of people kept doing it, which is why it made a big deal.
How many years has the Nigerian prince been around?
Since the 2000s, I guess.
Since the 2000s. Actually, I think ever since email came out, more than 2000, but yeah. So awareness about the Nigerian prince is really, really high. Everybody knows he's a criminal. If everybody you talk to will see him and they will immediately go, okay, it's a spam, delete it. But still people are using Nigerian prince. They're not even changing to say an Algerian prince. No change at all. The exact same email they keep sending out. Any reason? Can you guys think of any reason for that?
Because in the end, a layman who might not know about Nigerian prince can get scammed.
Yes. So there are 7 billion people on this planet. Maybe 1 billion know about the Nigerian prince and their scam. Okay, not 1 billion, 5 billion also you can say. The other 2 billion, the people who can't even be bothered to Google Nigerian prince scam, they are the ideal targets for this kind of a malware. That is why there's actually a theory in cybersecurity. There's a reason why nobody changes from the Nigerian prince, because they want to target the person who sees this email and goes, wait, Nigerian prince, does that seem real? If he thinks about that, he's not the target for this scam. Like they want the people who can't even be bothered to type that into Google. This mail should reach them. That's why. And as cybersecurity professionals or about to be professionals, if you guys join this career, our job is to protect those people, which is not an easy thing to do. Anyway, let's move on. So yeah, so what I'm trying to do now is I'm going to try and find the code that runs when you press enter. Instead of sending a request to Google, we're going to try and make it download our file. So if you guys notice what I was doing when I was speaking, I did inspect element and I found this input box, this class value. Like there's a reason why it's random. We'll talk about that later if you guys want to know. But I just copied this and did Control F, and I found the same class being used in two places, two input boxes. So I don't know which of these input boxes are the right ones. So what I'm going to do is I'll just change the numbers here. I'll put 1, 2, 3 here. And in the next one, I'll put 4, 5, 6. And we'll refresh. It says 4, 5, 6. Now, I don't know why that 1, 2, 3 HTML code is even there. I don't really care. I'm a malware person. All I want to do is, so again, that is one of the advantages the bad guys have. You can write millions of lines of code. They don't care. All they do is somehow find out this particular piece of code and their work is done. So this input tag, if you guys know HTML, is inside a form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the opening tag for that form, which just keeps scrolling up until I find it. No, should be here somewhere. Yes. Google.com/search get role equal to search. Now, obviously, there's some JavaScript going on in the background, which does when this button is clicked, it sends the request to the user, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add in something called an on submit. This is an event listener, return download. And I'm going to create a JavaScript function called download. Just to check whether it's working, I'll put in, please download the app to view results. And one return false. Now the return statement here, the return false, on submit, they're all web development things, they're quirks of JavaScript. I won't go into too much detail. I'll just tell you when you, either when you click this button or when you press the enter key, this code on submit equal to is going to run. The download function will execute. Return false will kind of prevent the JavaScript that Google has already written from moving forward. It will not allow the request to actually go to the Google servers. It will stop after printing out this alert. So let's just try it out. Whoops. Not quite sure what happened. Did I reload? I didn't reload. That was my mistake. So you can see now this page actually, by a total fluke, it actually looks like Google designed it. Same white and blue logo, just like this icon. So by the way, let's see if our previous task is finished. Yes, it is. So this was the PyInstaller task. The output is ready. When it ran, it gave me this pretty looking exe file. So all I'm going to do is double click this file now. Nothing happened. There's no icon, anything happening. Oh, there's actually one icon at the bottom. I didn't see that. Failed to execute. Okay. I'm not quite sure why that happened. Let me just check if it's. No. Okay. So there's probably something going on with PyInstaller. You have to look into those logs. But basically, to give you guys a summary, PyInstaller can be used to create this exe file. When you double click it, it will work the same way as the code that we wrote before. Now we don't have time to debug and figure out why it's not working. So I'm just gonna kind of continue with this. So let's just.
Do you want me to send my code, the code that you sent me yesterday?
No, it's fine. I think it's pretty much the same thing. So after the alert, what I'm going to do is, let's say instead of having this locally here, this test.exe, I'm going to quickly upload it to the server that you guys saw here. Just give me 1 second. Okay. /test.exe. It actually downloaded. Nice. So it looks like the exe compiled properly because it's saying it is a malware. Let's keep it for now. Okay, let's move on. Yeah, so we have the URL right here. /test.exe. I will just very simple JavaScript to replace it. Let's try running this again. Yes. Click OK. It should actually download the file. It's not. I think it is. It's loading. Okay. Okay, I don't think it's working. Just give me 1 second. So again, this is a specialty of JavaScript. Random piece of code will not work. It is fine if I have some other copy of this. Anyway, do you guys have any questions? Or if you have been very silent?
Don't you have to put document.get element by ID, something like that?
We could do that, yes. So basically this form, you can add in an ID equal to form or something. And then instead of this function here, we would do document.get element by ID dot on submit equal to, and type in the exact same code as before. They're both equivalent.
Because like you have just put document.href, it will go, but like it will take any other href also, that's fine.
Excuse me 1 second, let me just get that back.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I thought like it, because of like you're not mentioning which form element we have when we click goes, so because that might be a reason too. I thought that, I don't know, might be wrong.
Maybe. Anyway, this is not really the important part. Like you guys saw the alert. You guys saw how easy it was to just hijack any HTML page, display how it was. And by the way, probably should have started with this, but the intent of today's session was not to teach you guys how to write malware and hack into other people's computers. That is illegal. I hope you guys know that. Do not.
This is the disclaimer that was to be there before the session, but yes,
So there
please
was
note that.
like, great. So the idea here is to teach you guys how malicious people who write malware work, know how they could have written it, and you can use this knowledge later on to try and fix it or identify it. If you know how they think, you have an edge. That's the idea. So let's see if this code works. I copied it from Stack Overflow actually. Yes, says URL. So I just add in the URL.
Var URL.
Okay. Where is the URL? It's missing. We are done. Let's download, and it downloaded. So you guys can see it looks as though google.com itself is telling you guys that this app is downloaded. Just ignore this warning. There are millions of ways to get around this. We don't have the time to go to all of that, maybe in a future workshop or something. But basically this can be ignored. And when you click on it and try to run it, we can actually make it say publisher. Instead of publisher unknown, we can have it say publisher Microsoft or something. You guys had an example of that in the previous demo in the MITM proxy, right? It's
yes,
like
similarly.
Yes, same logic. It's very easy to change this. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt. Try to wind it up.
Session is done actually. That was the ending.
Okay.
So yeah, I actually covered everything I wanted to today. You guys saw how malware is built and written, how we can send it up into a server. Actually, if we had more people in here, no, like you can see the source IP address. This is my IP address that I have. Any of you guys ran it?
Will the same code run that you sent me yesterday? I'll try running it now. I have it in my downloads.
Let's try and leave it. It's just add in more rows to this table with your IP address as well. So it presents a single dashboard for the malware guy. So what a phishing person will do is he'll open this website and he'll just email it off to millions of people. They're not going to email it individually. Out of the million, maybe 20 people will click on the link. Out of the 20, maybe 10 will actually install the exe file. those 10 people, he can now access credit card details, email addresses, Facebook for passwords, everything. He monitors his keyboard. He's basically got anything and everything that person does. So yes, moral of the story, don't click on scary emails. Yeah, so yeah, I am done with my session. If you guys have any questions or anything.
I think questions we can ask, we can collect it. Okay, and we
No,
will share it.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. There's a feedback form in the chat box. It also has a question field. If you want to send any questions to any of the speakers, you can give it to us, mention the speaker name. We'll forward to them, and then we can tell you. 1 second. Darshan, can you stop screen sharing now?
Yeah.
Thank you, Darshan, for your wonderful session. I hope that all the guys enjoyed and they would have learned. Yes, Christina.
Joshua.
Lakshana, we really liked the entire the whole malware thing about how that actually works and how we could work in the future to prevent it.
Your bandwidth is lighter low, Joshua. So I couldn't hear what you said, but Christina, can you go forward, I guess?
Yeah, thank you so much. We really enjoyed the session. It was definitely useful. And hopefully, guys, you do remember the disclaimer that it is illegal to do it. If you want to do it within your closed environment on yourself, not on other people. But yeah, all right. So as Arunesh and Joshua already mentioned, there is a Google link for your feedback forms, all the questions you want. We will redirect them to it. So yeah, while I do the vote of thanks, feel free to fill it up. So yeah, thank you so much for Ma'am Chamundeshwari, ma'am, for allowing us to conduct this workshop, and hopefully it was very useful to you guys. I'd like to thank our principal, our HOD of CSE department, and also we'd like to thank ACM, IEEE, IET student chapter, and ACM's SSN chapter for allowing us to do this workshop very well. Also, I would like to thank all the speakers that came today. The first speaker, Mrs. Dr. Shubha, she was very great. I hope you all enjoyed her session about SDN, and then ma'am's session about Mininet, and hopefully you guys go through the tools that are there, and the IT healthcare security by Mr. Prabhadan, and then after that, yeah, and Bala sir's one before this, and Dakshinamurthy's one now. So guys, please take back something.